Last of Us Episode 3 really drove the point home with the emotional gut punch. Episode 4 makes up for that with the comic relief, particularly the pun book that Ellie reads to Joel throughout the episode, as well as the magazine scene, which we all cry with laughter over. Joel and Ellie are using the car that Bill left them, traveling across the country to Wyoming to find Tommy, and when they arrive in Kansas City, they're attacked by a group of survivors and they have to fight their way out. Same thing happens in the game, but as opposed to Kansas City, it's in Pittsburgh, which I always think is a neat little detail since I'm from Pennsylvania, but I don't really go to Pittsburgh that often, because from where I live, it's about a 3.5 or 4 hour drive, depending on which way you go. And in the case of this show, I understand why they chose to go with Kansas City, because geographically, it's obviously a lot closer to Wyoming. Those of us who played the game, we all knew what was coming with the ambush. Joel saw right through it since, as he says in the game, and even in this episode to Ellie, that he's been on both sides, so he knows the facade when he sees it. It's a reminder for the viewer that Joel has had to do a lot of morally ambiguous acts in order to survive after the outbreak. There's little details that this episode brings up, like the gas breaking down over time over a 20-year period, basically turning into water, and they have to refill their truck every hour. I think it's in vein with how nature eventually starts to take over with man-made structures or man-made things, if you will. Because in the game, all we really see is them still driving across the state of Pennsylvania, and we don't really see them stopping to get gas. On the game developer's part, I could see why they glossed over that, because you don't want to slow the story down by explaining all the logistics of what it took for them to get to Pittsburgh when they got ambushed. And it's here where Ellie starts to try to lighten the mood with Joel since he's been very closed off, while slowly but surely starting to let his bond with her grow. But in the ending of the episode before Henry and Sam show up, if I can remember correctly, I think this is the first time we actually see him smile when Ellie tells him the diarrhea joke, and he goes, "That is so damn stupid."
Did you know diarrhea is hereditary?
What?
Yeah. It runs in your genes.
I've told these jokes to various people, and they always give me the same response. Another detail I like is how Joel lays on one side of his body. I can't really remember if it's his right side or left side, because in one of his ears his hearing isn't too good from, I guess, a shotgun went off right near his head, so he's hard of hearing, and I would imagine that obviously with all the stuff that he's had to do to survive, your body can only take so much. In the games, you had more of a creative license to just pass it off and kind of go into God mode until he got impaled by that pipe at the Firefly lab, which I'm more than certain that's going to come up in one of the next episodes. But since he can't hear out of his one ear, he's got to stay up all night and keep watch in case anybody tries to jump them. The hunters in the game are not really given much personality. There's just some obstacle that you have to get through in order to make your way through the city to the bridge, which that bridge we actually get to see. I don't know if it's in the same location or not. I highly doubt that, but it's a nice little Easter egg that they threw in there. But we actually get to see a behind-the-scenes look of how this ragtag group is operating in the city. It's a common thing that we've heard in the games. The population in the quarantine zone push back against the military rule, except for Boston, unless that all changed by the events of Part 2. And we actually get to see their leader, who I believe is an original character for the series. Before you attack the hunters at one point in the game, you hear a mention of their leader, but you're never really given a name. And the actress... oh, darn it, I can't remember her name. But I recognize her from Perks of Being a Wallflower. And her lieutenant is played by the same actor who was Tommy in the games. And I like how they're not entirely on the same page of what they want to do with Henry and Sam. And at one point we see the floor kind of starting to cave in and that there's something underneath there. And I'm willing to bet, and from having seen the preview for the next episode, there's a bloater under there. As opposed to the game where Henry and Sam are part of this separate group of survivors that are trying to enter the city to look for supplies and they get ambushed by the hunters. I guess Henry is part of this group of survivors in Kansas City, and I suppose he did something that makes them want to look for retribution. We'll probably get that explanation in the next episode. These characters, Henry and Sam, are very important to the growth of Joel and Ellie's bond. I'm not going to get into that here if you don't know what the story is with the game, but I'm really excited to see how they're going to portray it, and I guess from what I can tell with these previews, Sam is a deaf kid, whereas in the original game he wasn't. I also really like that when they get ambushed by the hunters, it's only about maybe 2 or 3 people that jump them. It's one thing to show that in a video game, but in a television show, that's overkill. Joel tells Ellie to go hide behind this wall. She's got the gun in her backpack and she's waiting for the right moment, and then when somebody ambushes Joel, she sneaks up behind the guy and shoots him. But what I really like is that even though Joel is not happy with Ellie using a gun, he knows that she didn't have any other option, and given her emotional state, not exactly the smartest thing to do. Ellie is clearly shaken by what she's done, that she's capable of hurting somebody. And when Joel tells Ellie to walk away and we hear him stabbing the guy with the knife, her holding back those tears as she's hearing Joel doing that stuff, probably the most human portrayal of Ellie that I've ever seen in any feature of The Last of Us. Not to dismiss the previous 2 games or anything, but I think it's another example of how this television show, in some ways at least, not all of it, is on a completely different level. And of course we get to see Joel teaching Ellie how to use a gun just like he taught her how to use the rifle. Something that Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin have mentioned about the Survivor group. Even though they fought back against the harsh military rule, they're not much better from their predecessors. They're still willing to do all these horrible things in order to protect their own people. In an apocalyptic setting, you see what people are really capable of. As Friedrich Nietzsche once said, it's all about power. I also really like how we're not seeing the infected a whole lot. There's a long stretch of like 2 or 3 episodes where we don't see an encounter like we had with the clickers in episode 2. In a video game it's one thing, but to portray that in live action, after a while it's just gonna get repetitive and you have to savor those for certain moments throughout the show. If anyone's wanting more stuff with the infected, more than likely we're going to get that in the next episode with the bloater. But I also really like how this episode ends with a cliffhanger, with Henry and Sam pointing their guns at Joel and Ellie as soon as they wake up, making us the audience ask the question,
I don't know how we're gonna get out of this one.
And to backtrack real quick, the magazine scene, it's not quite as funny as it was in the original game, but Joel's reaction to when Ellie asked the question, why are all these pages stuck together?
Why are all these pages stuck together?
Always makes me lose it. I don't care how many times I watched it. Probably react the same way too if I were him. Because how do you explain that to a child? The show's getting better and better per episode. I even read that the audience is starting to grow too per episode. Whether it's the fans of the video game or people who haven't played the games or... No, it's actually, I would think, a mix of both. But hey, still, it's good quality television. How can you argue? Those are my thoughts on episode 4. Looking forward to seeing what episode 5 brings. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are in this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.